Good afternoon. Welcome to this episode of Under the Hood, Stories from the Trade. Like what I did there.
Why do you keep changing the name of it? Like?
I think that's good. I think it's better. Yeah. Because it is. Let's face it, all we've been getting is the last 3 months of stories. So I'm going to stick to that. Okay. Under the Hood, Stories from the Motor Trade in Ireland. Today, as always, joined by our resident, Keith Lenihan from Keith Lenihan Motors in Dublin. We're also joined today from Simon Gurney, has flown across again. I'm going to pretend you flew the whole way over and back.
Yeah,
again,
got it.
again. So Simon sat on from our last episode to have talk for about some technical details about Castrol, and also we're delighted that Stephen Walker has always continued to join us. That's brilliant. We've had a great chat there for the last hour, and it's just flew.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep going, and we're going to get some more. And quickly, just to mention that these episodes are sponsored by Castrol, distributed by Certa Ireland. Certa Ireland is the only official distributor and partner of Castrol in Northern Ireland and Ireland. So that's that bit done.
You rehearsed that well.
I did. I'm getting good at it. I'm getting
Blink,
good at
mate.
it. Yeah. I'll be thinking about it at night. Right, so I want to bring this topic up because it's something we talked about last day. It's a really hot topic, and you know, you're more of an engineer and you're on that side of us. We're in the mechanics. There's why we all like to think we're in the same team. There's when it comes to actually working on the cars and the spanners are flying and
Who designed that?
Yeah. Why you do that? So we'll bring up topic wet beds.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Yeah, so that's you know, you obviously don't walk into it. Wet beds. So we spoke last night about wet beds, and the general consensus from mechanics is who designed something that puts rubber in oil when historically oil rots rubber.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's you ask any mechanic, and most of them that have never really looked into the reason behind it, they just think they just did it to annoy us. You know, and they hit it into.
Would I be right in saying that it's coming down with friction again, isn't it?
Exactly. It's correct and right, and that's without looking into it too much. We spoke about chains, dry beds and wet beds, and as you explained to me last night, Simon, if you want me to go again, is that when you use a wet bed, right? So the bed, there is no room. Anyone that fits a chain will notice there's always that wee bit of movement between the chain and the gear, the sprocket. No matter how well tensioned it is, there's a bit of movement. Where there's movement, there's friction. Okay.
Yeah.
You notice on your dry timing bed that the belt's a much tighter fit.
Yes.
Around your sprockets, less friction, less movement. But there's still friction and there's still movement even in dry time belts. So how do you reduce friction and movement with the goal of getting to better fuel economy and lower emissions?
Pouring a barrel of oil.
pretty much, right? That's not where I was going, but yeah, it's the same result. So that's really where the wet belt is actually designed, despite our better judgment and thinking you just did it to annoy us. The wet belt was designed to reduce friction. Again, as we spoke earlier about, with the goal of reducing emissions.
Yep. So I mean, that's one of its big benefits is that inherent friction reduction, more fuel economy, arguably quite quieter as well. But you're getting less friction in that kind of interface of the belt and the teeth, and that can then carry over to fuel economy, which the OEMs want for their fuel economy targets or CO2 emissions. However, we know that in the industry they've got a bit of a bad reputation. Obviously they seem to degrade. Now I don't really understand the real reason why it's happening, because when we do all the testing, it's tested with the materials that the belt is made of. You know, there's a lot of plastics and rubbers in an engine today. The sealants, the chain tensioners, for example. For whatever reason, there seems to be an issue with them falling apart or pieces coming off. Now, it could be, I'm not for once saying this is the reason, you know, people could be using the wrong oil, potentially too long oil changes. Some of the fuels, maybe, you know, ethanol. How's the ethanol mix changed over the years so that we're getting more of these kind of more aggressive fuel getting into the oil, attacking the wet belt. But you know, some of the OEMs have moved back, so they've gone back to a chain now. So whether that's that may be giving us the answer as to what they really think. But yeah, they've really pushed fuel economy, but maybe this is an example of maybe that if it's been pushed too hard. But I don't see there's any real technical reason why it's happened other than it seems to be happening. And
I'm going to play the devil's advocate in the sense that we have vehicles that come in here on fleets, and I said this to you, that was not 300,000 kilometers, but 300,000 miles in vehicles with original wet belts, and we inspect them every service. You get in, you do whatever you have to do to actually get in and look at the belt, and if it's not cracked and it doesn't look like it's perishing, it's good to go.
Yeah.
And we have vehicles that the wet belts have been on far longer than they should be,
and they're still fine.
And they're fine. And we attribute that to our service, and we are the service partner of some of the larger companies. We have one exceptionally, one of Ireland's largest companies we're the service partner for, and we're having no issues. We're having no issue with wet belts. We have no issues with chains on engines that historically were notorious for giving chain trouble.
Yep.
We're not having these issues. For the people that are coming here regularly, and you'll find it yourself, because when you're doing the intervals more or changing the oil more often, I think it boils back to what you're saying, is that one of the things that I think this is probably fair, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but this is probably a fair statement to make, is that when you're doing your real world testing as the engine, the co-partner or the co-developer of the product, when you're doing your real world testing, that's fine, providing you have your real world testing for your fuels or whatnot. But outside of that area, when that car gets released into the wild, if you want, you have no control over the length of driving, if the customer's doing short runs, if they're not getting their regens, if they're doing short runs all the time where the car's regen a lot. And
there's so many unknowns, yeah.
They're using so there's so many different, so many different, you say, unknowns that are going to go into that equation that can cause an issue. That ultimately what's going to happen is, if you waited 30,000 kilometers for an oil change, there's so many different other things that could get into the oil.
Yeah, it's not going to be the fresh oil that's causing the problem, potentially. It could be that it's aged.
And all the other, it's all the unknowns that have got into it that were unexpected.
Yeah. I mean, it has been, and I'd say the position is, if you use the right oil, you shouldn't have any problems. But I'm going to, people are going to say that's a load of rubbish because there are issues in the field. But why? I don't know. Maybe people I think the oil's degrading, or it's being used. So it's doing its job, it's depleting acid. If that acid starts to build up, that's when you can start to see the oil effectively starts to become aggressive to these rubbers.
It's the acid, it's
potentially,
it's the unknown anomalies that have been introduced into the oil that's causing the issue, not the oil. Because it would be fair to say that a good way to try and prolong the life of your engine and your engine parts would be to change that oil even more often.
Potentially.
Not because the oil itself has failed prematurely. It's because of the other unknown elements that have entered the oil. You need to get them out. That would be a fair point to make.
Yeah. I mean, we the oils are designed with the fact they're going to get contaminated in the field. But
there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. So we wouldn't say, actually, whatever the OEM says, ignore that, change it more often. We do support the OEM recommendation intervals, but for peace of mind, how cheap is an extra oil change versus a new belt?
A lot cheaper. A lot cheaper. And, based on that, you're speaking about OEMs and Castrol historically have also, can you give us a couple of examples of when an OEM has contacted you and said, look, we're making a new engine, we're developing it.
Yeah.
What's involved?
Yeah, so I won't call out the exact OEMs. I mean, we have many. We have, like, a new engine was introduced. We had it 3 years before. So, that actually had wet belt technology. We could do some things with the oil. So by having the oil perform really well under high temperature, and it's really good oxidation, we could put the exhaust right next to the sump. And what that meant was the oil heated up faster. So on the emission cycle, the oil's warmer, it's thinner, it helps the emissions. So little things like that you wouldn't think about, like making the oil better in its oxidation, means you can run it hotter and warm it up quicker. And actually, we're able to reduce the amount of oil in the engine, which again, it's a lot of thermal mass to heat up an oil. If you can get that oil up to temperature quicker, it's thinner, it helps the emissions.
So there's two things you've just mentioned that we don't even think about.
One is like
who put that bloody exhaust near that sump? We have to go.
Yeah,
If we want to take the
exactly.
sump off, like, why? Why was it there? And, you know, why is the DPF in front of the engine when it should be at the back? You know,
Oh,
is it
yeah.
when there's enough room at the back? So that you've just said it's there to try and heat the oil quicker because the oil looks better when it's warmer.
Yeah, and that was
No,
like a kind of accidental benefit that was
Hmm.
noticed by doing that, what we call the co-engineering. That the oil's warming up much faster because
Yeah.
we get it closer, so make the oil better at coping at higher temperatures. Now, we did talk about the wet belt. That's some feature that the oil was fine with that material in testing. Don't think we need to go too much into the field issues with the wet belts. But there's plenty of examples. I mean, there's a diesel engine that's some hardware issues. Often an oil can be a hardware solution. Won't give specifics, but you know there might be a hardware issue that they are the OEMs fixing, and there's a plaster. We talked about like fix the
When you
symptoms.
say hardware issue, yeah, that's what it's like.
So like there's some engines that need a 10W60, even diesel, which helps protect certain parts of the engine. So it's always been about fuel economy, but there's chemistry effects, not just on the viscosity. Obviously, we work closely with Volvo and Jaguar Land Rover. Some OEMs want one oil for diesel and gasoline. Others have one oil for diesel, slightly thicker, and a thinner oil for diesel. So gasoline, sorry, getting these the wrong way around. So basically, if you go for a gasoline, slightly thinner oil, you can get more fuel economy, whereas other guys want one oil for both. But I mean, in terms of what we've done, I've been to Weissach at Porsche, so World Run for the Porsche approval tests. We've got an oil. We think it's, we've done everything we can. That's about what we need it to be. We'll send 40 litres of oil to Porsche or Porsche's test house. They'll run the engine and then they invite us over. We fly over, strip the engine apart. It's all on, a massive table and effectively like a hospital. And they'll look at every part of the engine, piston deposits. They'll even so what they do on that test, they'll effectively hammer it's a 350-hour test, but it's to accelerate the oil aging. Yeah. So you can basically do an oil drain. But they'll do an autobahn simulation. They'll absolutely hammer the vehicle and then they'll stop. And they'll do it again, then they'll stop. Yeah, and then that's really to look at the oil pipe coking. Yeah. So you don't want to deposit in the oil feed because then it's gonna starve the turbo of oil. And they literally cut that metal pipe in half, and you look at the deposits in it. They look at all the wear of the camshafts, of the tappets, every single aspect, and then be like, that's fine, or it's not. Make a tweak and come back, and we'll be like, oh, the pistons aren't quite clean enough. I mean, they'll be good, but they really hammer this engine. I mean, it's running E25 fuel, specially blended fuel to really go beyond what's in the market today. And they want their vehicles to work in China, where the fuel's quite different to Europe. They use a lot of ethanol with a heavy blend of fuel, whereas in Europe, it's a different way of formulating fuel. So we have to take that into consideration, the different fuels that are used. For Volkswagen, we may take 3 years to develop our own oil. So, for example, the Long Life 3, 504, 507, probably the most kind of technically challenging oil that we develop. We'll go to Volkswagen, and again, they'll take the engines apart. We look at them. They may want to see improvements in certain areas. So, it used to be the case with the pumper juicer engine, the 50501,
yeah.
Volkswagen 540. When I was back in product development, we developing oils for that spec, and the pumper juice engine you've got the direct actuated injector, so the fuel pressure is generated in the camshaft.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So the PD engine. So those engines would even have bearings on the replacement bearings on the camshafts, because the camshaft, obviously, whilst it's trying to push down that injector, the camshaft's trying to push itself out the block. You have to have really strong oils in that in terms of protection. And then we had some testing. We wanted to look at different formulations. So we got some cars, ran them 30,000 kilometers on a chassis dyno, different oils. And if we had one formulation, it wasn't very good because you could literally see 3 millimeters of wear in the camshaft because it wasn't quite right, the chemistry you were using. So it's really critical to get the right stuff. So if you put the wrong oil in your car because you want to save a few quid, I mean, it's quite extreme, but you're going to need new camshafts.
Yeah.
We used to have test cars. I mean, I wasn't there at the time, but one of the guys, he's left now, but back in early 2000s, had test cars that we'd have around the site, and they were like, let's just do 100,000 mile oil drain, just see what happens. It was a Japanese engine, but basically it was ran so hard it wouldn't go over 3,000 RPM because the camshafts had just worn away. Just to go to the extreme of like, you need to understand failure mechanism. So, you know, right or right car, I'm a massive advocate of. So it might be a 020, it might be really thin. You might think you get less problems with a 530, but that's just the base oil aspect. The additives are different. That's the critical bit.
But I can see there's 3 points there you've spoke about that I can see clearly where the manufacturers come to you and said, like one issue, and you're talking about oil coking from the high temperature to low temperature, the high temperature to low temperature, stop start.
Yeah.
So there's a car that's you're after driving down the motorway. You're pushing it. You're doing 120k plus. Sorry, under.
Never go that fast.
Nah.
What's the speed limit here?
What limit? You get to a toll bridge. Your stop start. You go to wave your card or pay the operator. The engine cuts out. So all of a sudden, straight away, in that small pipe, that oil feed pipe, and then the small gallery going through your turbo, you've got oil cooking then on. So that's something you have to deal with beforehand. You spoke about smaller amount of oils in the engine, because we would always be taking, more oil is better, because when you get long drain applications like your Renault Master that's got 10 litres of oil, your Mercedes Sprint's got 12 litres of oil, and your trucks then are up 35 litres of oil.
Oh yeah.
To do longer drains. So we're thinking the more oil you have, the longer it can be abused for, because there's more there to abuse and spread it out. But when you just say manufacturers are starting to turn that on its head by using a smaller amount of oil because it heats up quicker, and it's your job then to make sure that oil can withstand.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the big challenge. You've got thinner oil, you've got probably less of it, and the engines are under more pressure. So we talk about power and whatnot, but actually if you think about pressure, like the 1 litre EcoBoost, I think the 140 PS is 21 bar BMEP, brake mean effective pressure, basically the amount of pressure that piston is generating. And the only thing that stops the metal to metal contact when that piston's being smashed down the conrod into the conrod is the oil, right? So we talk about like the only thing stopping metal to metal contact is the oil. And then if you look, the Bugatti Veyron, when the EcoBoost came out, Bugatti Veyron's probably the fastest car in the world. That was 18 bar of pressure. So a Ford Fiesta was having more pressure in the engine than a 1,000 horsepower engine. So it's not about specific or outright output, it's about that specific output. You got a 3-cylinder engine making lots of power, specific power is very high. They went to a 520, not quite to a 020, but they really pushed the fuel economy. Incredible engine, really. I mean, you can just carry in a suitcase, but lots of load on the oil, lots of pressure on the oil. So it's important for the oil to keep those metal surfaces apart whilst doing everything else. And that's where, like, I think Stephen hinted earlier, like additives, like 20% of an oil is additives, and let's think this table is a metal. Let's say it's like a tappet in your engine.
Yeah.
You can put in those vanity wear and that'll stick to this table. But if you put too much in, nothing else will. You disperse its detergents, etc. So it's really important to get that balance right of the additives. So we would never say put anything else in on top. I know people do, but it's kind of that needle, thread in the eye of the needle is what we say.
Yeah, their precision correct, mate.
There's the YouTube videos when someone's got like, you've got this oil, I'm leaning on this lever and I'm seeing how much pressure it is to stop this thing rotating. That's a grease test. You can make an oil very good in that, but what do your pistons look like when you're going down the motorway? Are you getting piston deposits? Because then the piston rings start to stick and your engine starts burning oil. That's kind of it. You got to take it apart. So like getting that balance right is part of what we do.
Stephen, we spoke there about, and you mentioned that most the composite of oil, most oils now, to 75%, 75 to 80% is good oil, but 20 to 25% of the oil per volume is additive. But what a lot of people don't realise that while 20 to 25% of that oil is additive, on the flip side, 75 to 80% of the cost of that oil is in that additive. So when people are looking to try and get a cheaper oil, Simon, you spoke about how important it is for the oil to do its job. You're talking about PD engines, and now PD engines are obsolete at this stage, but even back then, 20 to, 1,000 more, over
All this stuff, mate.
1,004, so 20, they stop it. So 20 to 30 years ago, they had oil under so much pressure that if you didn't put the right oil into your engine, like the whole idea, you're talking about the top of this being metal, just the tear strength of that oil, that when the lobely camshaft pushes so hard on that, if you don't have the correct oil, right, and it's not just oil, it's the additives in it as well. So when you have a product that 80% of the cost of that product per volume is the additives, and you're saying it's so important to have the right mix.
Yeah.
Because you say it's more about precision, about putting that thread and needle. When people come to you and say, we need this cheaper, it gets to a point of it can't be done cheaper. If you want a cheap oil, you're not going to have the additives in it. You're not going to have that quality product.
Yeah, you might drop some of the specs off, for example.
You're going to have to drop. The only way to cheapen oil, when the smallest part of it's the dealer's part of it,
Yeah.
you can't make the crude, you can't make the base oil any cheaper because it's the cheapest part of it. So the only way you can make that product cheaper, I'm not talking about your oil, I'm talking about competitors that when they come in here and say, oh, we're definitely will give you the bar of 200 quid less than what Castrol is. So if the only way to cheapen our product is to take the additives, is to cheapen the additives, but you're saying you need every one of them things. We're talking about precision engineering here.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you take other categories where people make purchases like food or clothing, you're using your senses. So in clothing, you use the sense of touch, for example. In food, you use the sense of taste. We tend not to use our natural senses whenever we're purchasing engine oil because it's going into a vehicle. We're not consuming it in our own bodies. So you're very much reliant upon the experts doing that job for you. And probably a good example is on product supply. So for example, if Castrol have a product that isn't available, that's the bane of a salesperson's life, not to be able to supply the product that the customer wants to purchase. But if you roll back from that, it may be that the reason is that the additive that is required to make that product is not available at that particular moment. So Castrol are faced with a decision. Do you purchase a substandard additive to put into the product and diminish your own product quality? Or do you maintain your product quality and risk losing that particular sale? That's just an example of the relentless drive for quality that Castrol have. And it's another good example as to why our products are so well sought after.
The Castrol as a company, they're not willing to deviate from the actual from the mixture.
It just it helps to illustrate and answer that question that this has come up before in terms of product quality.
Yeah, because I know there's some other oil companies that they pride themselves on being able to offer everything.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is that it's not when it comes to a certain product. If an OEM comes to you and say, "Can you deliver to this product?" and you tell them, and you look into it and you go, we can't get that element that we need. We'd rather not do it at all than produce an inferior product.
The other thing is whenever Simon was giving some of the illustrations about engine testing that we do with manufacturers, and again, to get the oil to that particular standard, you talked about the challenge that it was to develop the long life product. The challenge for us as a business, particularly in the aftermarket, is to convey that. And quite often whenever a salesperson is in a workshop, technician's busy, manager's busy, it becomes a very rapid conversation. Does it have the specification? What's the price? And that's probably the two things that a workshop will ask. Now, having a specification or meeting a specification are two different things. Price is a variable that's based on quality of product, as we've already touched on. But probably the single thing that would be beneficial to overcome that is time. So we find that the customers who actually give time to that purchase decision and look at the material, look at the presentation, maybe watch the video of the product, they'll understand, they'll see some of the things that Simon's been talking about in terms of how the pistons react to the oil, etc. And whenever you can actually take the time to look at that, the penny starts to drop. And I love it. It's what I call the light bulb moment. Whenever a customer actually gets it and they realize actually there is a difference between the oils that are in the marketplace, and actually this small increment in price for Castrol, when you weigh that against the cost of the vehicle, it's a fraction. Now, the next step beyond that is once the workshop owner buys into the product, the next step is to convince the consumer. And so that's why we provide things like training, both online and face-to-face for service advisors and business owners so that they can communicate the benefits of the Castrol product to their customers. That's why we invest time in making sure that our marketing materials are of a particular standard to convey those benefits.
As a bit of feedback on that from I don't know how you find it, right? And you'd answer this. I'll hear that. You tell me how you find it in a second. When, again, we spoke about last night, is that I think a lot of mechanics need to realise, or a lot of business owners, that the customer is relying on the business owner to provide a quality product. Because a lot of customers go in, a lot of mechanics, they've this automatic notion, and I've been there, and I can speak as a mechanic that's been arguing with every supplier, going, I need it cheaper, I need it cheaper, I need it cheaper. But the reality is, the customer's coming in, the customer's trusting you as a mechanic or a business owner. There is a huge element of trust. The customer's expecting. The customer doesn't. I mean, fair enough, yes. They see the Castrol branding and they go, oh, he's definitely using quality stuff because it's such a well-known brand. But that's fair enough with the oils and when you have displastered everyone. But when you're dealing with other parts and products, there's an element of trust there that the customer is expecting you as a business owner or their mechanic. Not necessarily it could be a plumber, it could be an electrician. They're expecting you to use a product that won't fail. They're expecting when they come to a premium garage that you're using. When you go to a main dealer, just the automatic perception that everything is original equipment. You know, if you're using the oil's coming from the manufacturer, the filters are coming from the manufacturer, everything's from the manufacturer. Whereas when you go to an independent garage, where the consumables, the oils, the products, we source them, but the customer coming in that's paying top dollar to get the job done right, there's an expectation that the customer, and a trust, more importantly, that the mechanic is not using the cheapest product he can get, just as they're expecting. So when Sarah to Ireland came back here last year and brought Castrol back to McEwen Auto Services, and then ultimately to Keith Lennon Motors as well, obviously there's a small increase in the cost of oil because it's more expensive oil. As you say, it's precision engineering. It is the factory fill oil. All the oil we've used now in the past 12 months, there's absolutely no one's questioning it. Yeah. No one's questioning, because I think it's more important that garages and mechanics alike, they focus more on building the element of trust with their customer than penny pinching. Because penny pinching is going to ultimately lead to
it's race to the bottom as well.
It's a race to the bottom. It's not where you want to be. It's going to attract a customer that you don't want. You don't want the customer that wants the cheap of the cheap. And that's not putting anyone down. It's not saying some people can't afford the premium product. But at the same time, it's one thing saying you can't afford it. It's another thing saying you can't afford a repair if you don't use it. Yeah. So it's always cheaper to maintain your car better, in my eyes.
100%, yeah.
And I think that's where back, and we talk about aspirations. I think that's where most garages should aspire to be. They should aspire to be where, I know Ian has started, as we said last night. Ian is, he's with us 3 weeks now. And he said the biggest difference that he's noticed here at McEwen Auto Services compared to where he's worked before is that our customers are coming in for a service. In, out. There's no big jobs. There's no big dramas. The customers that are coming, our regular customers that have been coming here for years now, servicing, brakes, wear and tear parts, that's it. He says the last couple of places he walked was all problems, but they weren't as particular on the product they were using, whereas we are sticklers for product. And how you find, you've moved to Castrol now?
Yeah, and it's, again, not a lot of customers, as I said earlier, would come in and go, what oil are you using? They just put the confidence in us to use the correct oils. Yeah. And I think it's so important, and there's a lot of places not using the correct oils, and you're not, whilst they may be slightly cheaper, they're actually doing the customer an injustice by being cheaper. Because they're not servicing the car correctly.
Yeah, if you need to replace something later, any savings gone straight away. Turbos, piston.
Now, what we done was we put the tank system in, so we buy it in higher volumes. Obviously, when you're buying it in more volumes, you get a little bit of better value. So that's to obviously, so we're not whacking the customer now with rising costs. So look, just trying to be as efficient as we can. But yeah, no, it's I think it's so important to use.
And we're talking about engine oil. I mean, same with
Engine oil,
with Driveline as well. You know, getting the right stuff in, the right product. I don't know if you guys do a lot of it, but you know, we've focused a lot on the engine oils, but actually using the right Driveline, the right gearbox oils.
And that's something that again, I know when I attended a sales event a couple of years back, they were selling the gearbox flushing machine, and the figures were back in 2011, 21% of new registrations in Ireland were automatic. We're roll on 10 years later, 21% of new vehicle registrations were manual.
Yeah, it's
There's
completely
a
flipped.
massive shift has moved to automatic, and it's not all electric vehicles. That electric vehicles only account for a small amount of that. It's a lot of people are going manual. A lot of young people now. But look, it's pretty much just the American way has made its way across. It's all
Yeah.
they call it
Convenience.
stick shift over there. It's a big deal if you get into a stick over there because it's what do I do with that thing? We really hope you're enjoying these videos. We'd just like to take a couple of moments to thank Certa Ireland, who are the official country partner of Castrol Oil in the island of Ireland, north and south. If you do want any products, please support Certa and give them a shout. They're really supporting us here on our podcast, and they're also supporting independent garages in Ireland like you. Do give them a shout if you want any Castrol Oil. Back to the video. It's a big deal if you get into a stick over there because it's what do I do with that thing?
Yeah, it's a category we've worked really hard at actually, because previously we would have had multiple different product brands within the Driveline category, and probably about maybe 3-4 years ago we said we were going to take all of the product brands, merge them into the Castrol Transmax brand. Now we have multiple variants of Castrol Transmax that sit underneath that, but it's to make it easier for the consumer to understand the category, and also for the workshop to understand the category as well. I mean, the work that's been done on the technology side and Driveline's been immense.
We've done, there's a lot of new products to increase the coverage of those, especially auto transmissions, because we're seeing it in markets like Ireland where it's auto transmission fluids. How do you service that ZF box? How do you service that dual clutch? Because actually the drain intervals are there for those gearboxes. This fill for life concept is kind of still there, but you know what is
that's what I was
life?
actually going to ask you that. Why would someone put what we actually done by BMW down at it's an 08 520 diesel with an automatic gearbox in it, and the sticker on it says no service interval required basically. So why, how, who come up with that? Like it's sorry, but like it's
who thought that was a good
I think
idea?
ZF say it changes, don't quote, well, you're quoting me if I'm on video, but you know, they're saying it's kind of like 80, 100,000 kilometers, 10 years. So the life doesn't mean forever.
Well, I can quote ZF because they've told me.
Yeah, I can't recall what it is.
They've 80,000 kilometers interval for that gearbox. ZF recommend from day dot.
No. Yeah, there's a sticker put on the some sign.
ZF don't put that sticker on. That's all. That's
so where there's a need for that,
This is the stuff I can confirm.
So if you want a fluid for that gearbox, now we have our product. I mean, it doesn't matter what it's called. We have a product. That is suitable for those, or tested in those ZF gearboxes. Now, if you look at ZF Lifeguard, it's green, and if we sell our product, it's red. And be like, how can it be the right oil if it's meant to be green? It's red. Well, actually, so we've dyed it red because it's a Dexron 6 product. To have a Dexron 6 license, it has to be red. However, it is suitable to go into these ZF gearboxes without problem. So we're trying to get these big products that I think that one product, I'm not advertising, I'm just saying, covers 91% of auto transmission fluids in UK and Ireland. So pretty much any auto transmission gearbox could be serviced by that fluid.
But that's a really good, because I actually got on to our local representative and I said, oh, Patrick, will you give me, there's the specs I need, and I said this one, and he came back to me with a single product, and I was like, no, where's the other two? You know what I mean? I'm not looking at one product. Come back to me when you have the three of them. I'll sit there and look at them all. I'm not looking at one bit at a time here. No, that's it.
Yep. That's exactly where we're meant to be. You guys want one or two oils to do everything. Well, that's an example of what we've been trying to do. make it easier for you guys and still not compromise on the quality of performance.
I think in the way, and that's, you know, the way things are going with workshops and the lack of technicians and people not coming into trade, I think the job, it needs to be made simpler. Do you know? And I think by having a multi-grade oil, that does work well. I know we've been using Transmax. Oh, I'm going back 15 years. I remember people when I was, you know, going out on my own business, when McKeown Oil Services was in its earlier stages, and you just took on with anything, you know, just to get them in. So we had a big group of people that had Nissan Skylines in the area, and they were coming to me specifically. One fella came in and got a manual transmission oil change, and oil came out, and at the time, the only place I could buy the Transmax was Halfords. So I was going to Halfords, buying the thing, and the difference, those lads are coming back, they were hard in their boxes, so all they were interested was going sideways and ramming into gear.
Yeah.
And the gear had to take the gear, because if it didn't take the gear, next thing there's about 200 people looking at them going, oh, you missed it. You know? So they wanted the thing right, and they all come back and said to me, they started all coming to me purely because they said when he changed the oil, they didn't ask me, and we're back to our earlier point, they never asked me what oil I'm using. They just knew when Sean changed the oil, they didn't miss any gears.
Can I just pick up on this point about what a customer not asking, what are you using? Just because a customer's not asking you what you're using doesn't mean you shouldn't tell them what you're using.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it would be on the
I-
invoice, like,
I
you know.
think so. This is so the discipline that you're showing to your business. So putting the Castrol product description on the invoice, using the leaflets, maybe if you've got handover wallets at service reception, those are all little bits that give the consumer more confidence. So if a consumer's going to go and purchase oil in a retail environment like Halfords, for example, he goes in, he picks up the pack, he looks at it, he feels it. You know, there's a certain interaction with the product. When you're doing it for him or her in the workshop, they don't have that experience. The only experience they have to get the confidence of the brand that's being used is at service reception or in the pre-booking call, etc. So a lot of customers work hard at that to try to make sure that they keep dropping in at various points in the conversation what's being used, because that increases the value of what you're doing in their minds. So you're doing a great job with that. I would keep that going.
It's back to what you say as well, discipline. I saw a thing last week where motivation is short term, because you keep, if you're relying on motivation to do something, you have to keep getting whatever it is to motivate you. Whereas if you get disciplined, army like if you want, it's regimental. If you instill discipline in your business, you don't have to keep giving people pats on the back. Say, oh, you don't have to keep motivating guys to do this, or you don't have to work when being Mr. Motivator. If you instill some discipline in your business, discipline means the thing happens all the time. And I think it's a much better way of operating, and knowing that when you walk, you can take yourself away from your business, knowing that the discipline you've instilled carries on. So yeah, again, it's behind. This is probably a good time for myself and Keith to get a wee bit of marketing literature.
He's got the brochures.
Did you not take enough?
We'll get it all.
Yeah, where did he get that from?
Do you not think we're doing a good enough job?
You're
of telling
doing a
everyone what we use.
fantastic Yeah, if every workshop looked like this, we'd be really happy. Yeah.
I'm just got an image of him being Mr. Motivator still in my house.
You the green Mr. Motivator.
Yeah.
One of the other things we spoke with Simon and you're telling me was that again makes you think about everything that were frictions involved in your life, and just how many instances were Castrol, where you don't see them, but where they are.
Yep.
And going forward is electric vehicles. When I did my degree there a couple of years ago in Louth County, one of the big things they were saying is, oh, you won't be selling oil now, and it's going to be a big thing to your business. No, we don't make that much on oil. It doesn't prop our business up. While using a good quality oil is intrinsic to having no comebacks, it's not going to kill us. But what you told me, Castrol is on top of that game.
Yeah.
Stephen, you said that 3 out of 4 OEM manufacturers are you still using Castrol oil in EVs. So where's the oil in the EVs?
Yeah, so still in an EV, you've got a gearbox. So you haven't got a gear to select, but there is a box and it's got gears in. So basically the motor is driving what we call a reducer gearbox. So 7 to 11 to 1 ratio is typical. And obviously the differential's still in there. Some EVs have 2 motors, some have 1. So the first generation EVs we'd call dry motor. So a bit like an electric drill, there's no oil cooling, but that's driving the reducer gearbox, which is then driving the wheels. Second generation, so we've seen Volkswagen brought out that new motor, the AP550, loads more torque, loads more efficient, because the oil is also in the wet motor. So by doing that, you can get more copper in the motor. So the copper fill factor goes up, means you get more density, more power out the same size motor because you can cool it with oil, which gives massive challenges. So a dry motor equipped EV, it's basically a normal manual transmission type fluid, maybe a bit thinner, because if you can get a thinner, lower viscosity oil that still works, we get more range. But with a wet motor, the oil is protecting that gearbox and cooling the motor. So you've got the challenges of dealing with wear, massive torque from idle, zero.
Can't be conductive.
Can't be conductive, can't foam. So an EV motor, 15 to 20,000 RPM. So twice that of even the fastest ICE.
Yeah.
So lots of challenges on that. Some of them are bringing in drain intervals, 4 to 5 litres potentially oil fill per motor. The BYD Seal, that's just been launched EV in Europe, that has an oil drain interval of 60,000 kilometres, I believe. So yeah, there's still a demand for oil. There's still, brake fluid in an EV. There's still coolant. A lot of it today is normal ICE coolant. Most EVs, 50 to 100% more coolant than an ICE. It's up to 20 litres of coolant. So we've got a Castrol Radical range that is our offer. But beyond that, so if we look at today's technology, you've got a battery. It's what we call indirect cooled. So the coolant will be on the bottom plate or ribbon. So Tesla use like a copper ribbon that goes between the batteries.
Yeah.
So I think, a Tesla battery is 7,000 cells in a battery. Each cell needs to be cooled. So what we're going to now is our EV thermal fluid. So we've spent, we're investing heavily in our technology centre in the UK, developing or building a battery fluid test centre. And we'll be looking at charge rates of up to 1 megawatt, looking at how we can really cool those batteries. And the way to cool batteries is direct cooling. So the cells are immersed in an oil-based liquid, low viscosity. You can make the pack smaller. You can make, they cool a lot better, so you can charge much higher rates, and inherently they're safer. So the oil will quench any nail penetration or damage to the battery or thermal runaway. So we're heavily invested in that. And in, the next 2 years will be the first EV on the market with direct cooled batteries, which will be using Castrol on fluid. So there's a lot that's in EV and fluids for cooling, for reducing friction, increasing efficiency in our Castrol on fluid range. So thermal fluids and EV transmission fluids. And if we said about driving around and we've all got computers, 2% of the energy used in the world is related to data center. So cooling data centers, moving data around the world. So a spin-off of the technology of EV thermal fluids to batteries is actually data center cooling. So oil-cooled data centers. So 40% of the energy for a data center is keeping it cool. So massively inefficient, really. You're running air conditioners to cool down the air, to then get heated up by computers, to then be dumped to the atmosphere.
So heat's transferred.
Yeah, so if you can cool, I think it's in Exeter, they have a data centre where it's cooled by a fluid, and that excess heat is then pumped to a swimming pool next door. So you're reusing that energy as well.
So if you're able to slow down the heating, so if you talk to right, your typical air-cooled data centre, right?
Yeah.
So your air-cooled data centre, so you have to remember that heat is generated. Everything is energy transfer. So your electricity is coming in, it's going through the computers, that's generating heat. You also have an air conditioning system generating heat to cool the heat that's already there. It's all transfer.
Oh yeah, it's
and as you
loads
say,
of wasted heat.
so there's a massive amount of wasted heat that's not been utilised. That could be turned into electricity or something if they were really
They
thinking.
do bring in a bit of the heat into the workshop here.
There you go.
Get a wee data centre.
Move next to a data centre.
So, people devote about electric cars and EVs and whatnot. They're exceptionally narrow-minded to technology and innovation, because that phone in their hand, their cloud, it's not cloud, it's a bloody data center. That's the long and short of it. But they're so narrow-minded that they don't realise that the technology advances in electric vehicles have allowed these data centres to be cooled now by the same technology that was designed to cool an EV battery. And by keeping the computer cooler through using your oil, it means
it's
that
just more efficient. Yeah.
they won't get as hot. So therefore, there's less heat to transfer to the atmosphere.
Mm.
So all in
You're
all,
not using energy to cool. Yeah, so 40% of the energy is going into cooling. If we can reduce that, so that's a spin-off. You wouldn't, we do oil for cars.
you wouldn't have that.
This is another. Yeah, so we've done. I mean, we're chatting about on Mars. We've got our greases that are made from certain chemistry that won't evaporate in no atmosphere.
I was only talking about going down the road and bumped into cars, but you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about planets.
But just examples of everywhere. And then and then you go onto a big ferry crossing the Irish Sea. That's probably got Castrol oil in it. 2-stroke diesel. You've got a cylinder oil that's kind of protecting the pistons and whatnot. You've got a different oil for the camshafts in those engines because they're massive. I mean, it's the size of this building. Some of those engines, pistons over 1 meter wide.
Like it's so essentially what you have is you've people you've engineers globally that are developing products. They go, bit of friction here.
Yeah.
They're on the phone with you.
Or we've got engineers on the boat, literally on the boat, testing products whilst it's going across the Atlantic. They'll be looking at different oils and looking at deposits and whatnot, making those engines run more efficiently and the oil lasts longer. There's engineers in boats, in OEMs, vehicle OEMs.
You said that last week, and that you actually have engineers in-house at OEMs monitoring.
Yeah, embedded
testing
engineers.
and monitoring.
Yeah, so the OEMs see, just like a headlight or a piston, they see oil as a component that they have to look after and develop. Looking at, because the guys, say the OEM, they have all their engineers in one place. If they need support on the oil, they haven't got to wait for us to write into the phone or email. They walk up to the desk of the Castrol embedded engineer and talk to them. It helps the development cycle much quicker. These guys have got a system on the OEM's computer system and on ours, so they've got 2 laptops. They're literally a part of that OEM, and that enables them to develop things much quicker cycle times.
So you're talking about your BMW long life 04. That certain approval mark was developed in 2004, but because you have an in-house engineer and is constantly updating and identifying issues as they progress. So what you're saying is that when you keep with the Castrol product, especially in areas where you have in-house engineers and OEMs, that you're able to turn around and you have that product, even though the original mark was 2004, the oil that you're selling now in 2025 has been updated numerous times.
I mean, long life 04 is it's kind of an older 5W spec. If you look now, we're on like long life 19 or 22, which has gone for that fuel economy. But I mean, people are saying there's no more development in ICE, but there's ICE platforms, ICE modules that, some OEMs are tweaking, and they're doing new designs within that kind of modular design. So I mean, BMW is an example, not necessarily the specific one, but their Baukasten series is modular engines. It's either 3-cylinder, 4-cylinder, or 6, and it's just bolting it all together. So there's still work going on. There's still push to get more fuel economy out of the same hardware, and there's more challenges that may need, evolutions of engines, that different hardware needs different oils to carry on with reliability, with emissions.
Tell me, in testing, where in the pursuit of perfection, if you want to call it that, in the pursuit of trying to get it right, what has gone wrong? Tell me some stories where when you're testing, you go, oh, that didn't work. What?
Oh, there's loads. Yeah. There's funny stories like when people have built engines. Like when I was a graduate, we used to do a motorcycle engine test where we'd just run it until the piston ring stuck. So I just remember the technicians one day, they built the engine, fired it up, and it just blew up straight away. And it turned out when they put the gudgeon pin in, they missed the piston. So maybe it was a heavy night, but there's quite a few. I mean, I remember there was a time when we were doing a lot of work with an OEM. In fact, we were with BMW technical part of the time. They were interested in the effect of EGR on lubricant performance. So high levels of EGR. It was one of my first jobs as a graduate engineer. So we developed a cycle that basically put in loads of EGR. Can we look at how much deposit is an EGR valve. Can we affect that by the lubricant? What's the impact of EGR on fuel economy? Things like that. So we had a development ECU. We talked to the OEMs to tweak it. Spent ages doing that. That was really good, like investigation where we're going beyond what the cars would do in the market, but actually really pushing the boundaries of EGR and whatnot. I mean, the level of EGR we had, the car needed 5% more fuel economy to do the same drive cycle because EGR is naturally destabilising the combustion, but it's dropping your NOx. We've moved now to Euro 6, make loads of NOx, nitrous oxides in the engine, more efficient, you're not wasting fuel. Let the AdBlue sort it out downstream. That means then now Euro 6 engines have more acid developing in the oil. So things like that. But I just remember we had the engine come in off site because we don't have everything on site. Spent all day fitting it, and then it's like, that's the wrong engine. We should have put the other one in. But we had like, and there's technicians there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week running these engines. Some of them are 800-hour tests we'll be running, looking at piston ring wear. Lots of different, you can look at a different ring pack. Because one of the challenges of the BMWs of that era, or the diesel engines of that era, was running them in. Yeah. You got to really run them in hard because the piston rings are so hard. If you want to have good oil consumption, is run them in hard from the start. Don't sit on the motorway and do your running in.
That was actually something I wanted to ask you because like years ago you had to do a run-in service, and certainly on any modern M car now, like there's a 1,200-mile service. And you wouldn't buy an M3 unless it was done, or an M5.
Yeah, it's really critical to get ticked off.
But that was the same on most makes and models years ago. What's changed? Like I know Lara mentioned on one of the podcasts that we done that they done an oil change on I think it was a brand new Land Rover, and they done an oil change of 2.5, 5, 7.5, and 10, and the parts per million count of metal foilings in the oil dropped dramatically. So Land Rover, I think the intervals are recommended at, well, it'll be less now, but it could have been up to 30,000 kilometres at some point. So the readings, if I'm not wrong, in thinking were 90 parts per million at 2,500 miles, and it dropped down to 9 parts per million at 10,000. So when you're recommending an oil change of running up to 30,000 kilometres, what's made oil so fabulous that
you don't need
to do them run-in servicing? Is this all just manufacturers pushing to drive costs down of servicing for the customer, or is it actually better? Because in my opinion, it would be better to come back at 5,000 kilometres and get your oil changed.
I think the first synthetic oils, the very early ones, were kind of a bit too, the lubricity was so high that you didn't get that like metal to metal contact to really get it's really the piston rings. It's not, camshafts and that don't really run in the way that a piston does. Because you try
bearings, I would have thought, big hand bearings now I thought would have.
Yeah, well, so you've got, so your camshafts are called what we call like boundary lubrication. So this Striebeck curve, it's about, where you are. So boundary lubrication is you're like a water skier and you haven't started going yet. You're just scraping along the bottom. Right, so there's not enough water, there's too much pressure, so you're scraping across the bottom. That's boundary, so it's about the chemistry. The bearings we'd call hydrodynamic, so they're going along nicely. Apart from stop-start, when they have more of these going from boundary into mixed into hydrodynamic. So, you're surfing along nicely. You've got the reason a bearing works is because it's basically forming a converging wedge. So effectively, you've got an angle and the journal's surfing that. So there shouldn't be any metal contact apart from when you start and stop it. So bearings don't really need running in. Piston rings are the interesting one because they surf, stop, touch, come back down. So you've got the ring reversal points, which are the key bits. But obviously your cylinder liner and your piston rings aren't perfect. So you want to run them in, but you don't want to run them in too hard by revving a new engine too hard because all the high spots get too hot and harden. But if you sit on the motorway and you've got no cylinder pressure behind them, they don't bed in. So you want to basically run it in quite well by giving it lots of kind of transient throttle. If you've got a turbo, getting some boost behind it, but don't rev it hard. That's the way to bed in an engine. In terms of like what you're saying about ppm, so parts per million, so 90, whatever.
I don't know if they were the exact readings, but
but I mean they're typical sort of 10%,
numbers. Like a drop from 90 to 9. It was. But
you're going to get that initial period. You're going to get lots of wear, and then it settles out, and that's where you'll see it's gone from 90 to 9 because you basically got rid of those metal particles when you've changed the oil. Why the OEMs don't? I don't. You know, modern hardware, thinner oils, you're naturally getting in a better bedding in process. You're not going to a 1040 or, you know, some OEMs do. I know when we went to Koenigsegg and spoke to Christian, they still like to use on their, you know, we talked about BMEP, got the Fiesta 21, the Bugatti Veyron was 18. Their engine's like 35 BMEP. So completely different world of engine. They like to run a kind of a mineral or a different oil to what they did in service. But most OEMs now don't see the need for it. It's a pain. No one wants to bring the car in 1,000 miles later. I mean, BMW M used to do it back in the day. I don't think they do anymore.
Yeah, okay, right.
The BMW M's are quite interesting with their 1060, which is fine for that engine. It was built for a 1060, it was spec for that 1060. But I think, yeah, for running in, they just ran something thinner.
So see the oil. So the oil that comes from in your car when it's brand new, is that potentially different than the oil that you would use then for general servicing?
No, so I think I'd say 95% of vehicles use the same oil that would be used in service. You know, Volvo, JLR, if you bought a Castrol bottle, you'd get the same stuff that goes in at the factory. No, I'd say none, very few. Someone will probably challenge it, but they do not use special running oils anymore. I'm not sure you're the BMW M fan as much as me. I mean, the latest BMW M's, mine's too old now. Still got the tick in the box, 1500. But I mean, the 1060 was probably too good to run in an engine.
This is all a lot older than yours.
Yeah. But I mean, the newer ones, you know, the F and the Gs, I don't know what they do. BMW M did go from 1060 to more typical when they went to the turbocharged engines. Like the
I
S55.
think if you were to go in and if I went in and bought a new M car, I think any car that was anyway sort of high performance or any kind of any new engine, to be honest with you, I think you're better off just getting the oil changed.
Yeah, peace
You
of
know,
mind.
at 5,000 kilometers, say like for an ordinary run of the mill car, like at 5,000 kilometers, and then maybe do it at 15.
But don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, I'm changing it every 5,000. I'll just use a cheap oil.
No.
But still, that's one of the kind of myths. Like, I don't need to get an expensive oil if I change it more often. Well, we're not talking about the longevity of the oil. We're talking about how well it protects.
I know. I'd be totally into high quality.
Yeah, I
oils,
mean, if you've had your engine rebuilt, a lot of people will say change it after 1,000 miles, whatnot, because you've got all the assembly greases, the pastes and whatnot. But I think the OEMs, how they build their engines in ultra clean environments, whatnot, don't need that mindset. But if you're rebuilding an engine in your garage, like you've done it yourself, you know, you've changed your rod bearings or you've put in a new camshaft and you put greases and that in, peace of mind and getting rid of that early. Because some of these metals that hang around in the oil, they kind of can be catalysts for other reactions. So it can be good to get rid of them. But yeah, I wouldn't ever go against the OEMs in terms of what they're saying. Some of them, if you're driving like quite excessive drive cycles or you've got a diesel that doesn't always get its temperature, you're going to get issues with oil dilution, especially B7 now. So yeah, every car is different though. Like I think we said on the call, on my BMW, I change the oil every 2 years. I'm fine with that, but I never drive it for longer. I never drive it for less than 15 miles. So if I start that engine, I'm driving it. I don't start it, move it, and then, because on it's 1060, it takes ages to warm up. If you're just driving a car like that to the shops, then maybe it doesn't look so good after 2 years. But I have a look at the oil because I'm a geek, just to see what's going on with it. I mean, it's an expensive engine as well, but not seeing any massive issues. But I can't comment on everyone. If you're just driving to the shops, or if you're in humid, like we say in Ireland, it's quite humid and a lot of short journeys. Taxi drivers are interesting. They're stop-starting all the time, but actually their engine's always up to temperature. But if you're sat there idling, you've not done any miles, but your engine's consuming fuel, so it's engine on time. So it's a whole plethora of different drive conditions.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
And that's why I think if you use the right oil, or the right oil, the right car, decent quality stuff, whether it be Castrol or another well-branded oil, you know, buy a really good product because it will protect your engine. The most expensive part of your vehicle is probably the engine, maybe the gearbox.
The labour.
Yeah.
The labour involved in fixing it, but I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you need to fix it, parts are expensive. you don't want to be broken down, and then what's good for you guys, it's a lot of labour for that car owner, just because they've chosen to save a few quid on the oil.
I'd be much happier, I don't know with you, but I'd be much happier doing a service than pulling an engine.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean? Because then the customer's not happy no matter what you do. I always use the analogy of, do you know what I mean? When you go down to one of the TV, the stores to sell television and electronics,
Yeah.
you're going to spend £1,000 on a television. You've got a nice television for £1,000 and it's going to be sizable, and you go home and you hang it on the wall, and every evening you come home, and you're delighted with that purchase because you're getting enjoyment out of it. And if you're into rugby, like there's rugby on today, or if you're into your soccer or Gaelic, whatever you're into, you can go home and you can watch this and you have a better experience because you bought a big TV. Would you come in to Sean or Keith and drop £1,000 and you drive back out?
It's nearly a begrudged payment, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, it's like going and getting a filling in the tooth, yeah.
It's worse than tuning. At least
It's
when you
still, it's still
upgrade
the
a car.
same car in the driveway.
Yeah, it's nothing worse than fixing the car. You want to be upgrading it.
Yeah.
Making it faster, making it better. But when you spend money to
I'd
make it
say
how
that
it
to all
was
my
before, you're like,
Hyundai
what?
i10
They always say
customers.
like, what is it? Price is forgotten long after, or quality is remembered long after price is forgotten. Because you like your TV, you don't suddenly sit there and go, oh, I spent loads of money on it. You just think, oh, I'm so glad I bought that good TV that I can enjoy every night. Well, you ain't gonna worry about the oil.
You
or your
can't,
engine.
you can't afford the TV if you're fixing the car.
There you go then. You don't need a TV if you're fixing your car either.
I think just that we'll probably be wrapping it up shortly, but a good point to make is that you're doing the customer a favour by using the good oils.
Yeah.
By using bad oils, you're doing the customer an injustice, you know. And as I said earlier, customers don't come in and, generally speaking, they don't ask what oil are you using.
What's the
And
difference?
ask to see
£20.
and ask to see a spec sheet, right? Do you know? They don't.
We don't even look the specs.
So it's
to be
up.
honest.
It's up to. I think it's up to the garage to maintain and give the customer the good quality oil. And I think if you're selling cheap oil to them, you're actually doing the customer an injustice. You'd be better off charging an extra 30, 40, 60 quid for the correct product for the vehicle, because as like you've Castrol, they're a manufacturing partner now with most of the, if not all of the brands.
And even if they're not a kind of technical partner, there's still specs that are coming out now.
Yeah.
Even like last year, new specs coming out, like, you know, a good example is the new Stellantis FPW9 spec, different versions. So they put a technical service bulletin for all their kind of engines that are already in the field. They've moved to this new 5W30 spec. So we have a product for that. It's really critical to use the right oil in those sort of engines, because the OEM has said, actually, what we were recommending, we've changed our view. We'd now like you guys, garage owners, to use the correct oil. So yeah, that's, you know, even now, there's still new engine oil specs. It's not all, everyone's going EV. There's still work going on in engine oils. We'll see what happens, but, you know, hybrids potentially. We see in China, there's quite a big growth of range extended EVs. So an engine that just charges the battery. So, you know, engines may come back or be more important than what we once thought.
Again, the Stellantis one is a good example whereby, you know, we have customers in contract to us who maybe have in their portfolio brands that fall under Stellantis, and we had some product gaps. We didn't have the oils to meet the specification required, and the question we would be asked is, but surely if we use a different specification Castrol product, it'll be fine. The position we took was, don't do it. Use the oil that has the manufacturer specification. We'll come to you as soon as we possibly can with the Castrol product with that specification, but in the meantime, we're prepared to lose that volume to protect your business.
That so speaks, yeah. And that's
Yeah.
just, it sums it up, doesn't it?
And that's really, really important. But now we can go back to them and say, we now have those products with those specifications. So you've got both. You've got Castrol and you have the specification. So it's all part of the process, and meeting our customers' needs the right way.
Just doing the job right. That's great, lads. Thanks very much for
Thanks very much, lads,
staying
yeah.
on to that.
Great chat.
And look, again, I hope you've enjoyed that conversation, and keep watching, because we're going to have more of these in the future. Thanks for watching.